Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. Now, I am Robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 700. And, what episode? 16? 17? One of those two. Take your pick. No, I'll tell you. Hang on. Let me see if I got it. It's 16, not 17. I'm trying to sneak one in on you. 16, absolutely. 716. It's overwhelming either way. I can't believe it. Amazing. Not as overwhelming as SpaceX's new rocket, but very overwhelming. I got a few items of business I thought I'd take care of right at the top of the show. The first of those is a tip, a forgotten tip that I keep meaning to address, and I don't address. It comes from Super Psyched or Mike Psyched. Mike Psyched or Super Psyched. And he wrote in and said, "Bring on the whimsy, Rob." That's a nice Weyland-Yutani t-shirt. I submitted an idea for a blue Weyland t-shirt to Last Exit to Nowhere. As you all know, Last Exit to Nowhere is one of my favorite geeky t-shirt companies. They are the best because you have to know what they are. And it's part of, like, when you buy a t-shirt from Last Exit to Nowhere, it's like joining a club. You know, everybody who's in the club knows. And that's what makes it fun. Anyway, I submitted an idea for a blue Weyland shirt to Last Exit to Nowhere. They will listen to suggestions. So if you have an idea yourself, I'm sure some of us won't mind submitting your idea to Last Exit to Nowhere. Ooh, I did not know that, Super Psyched. I didn't know that you could do that. I'd have to come up with something good. I mean, the reason that I discovered Last Exit to Nowhere, I've told this story before, is because I saw Simon Pegg was wearing a WGON logo. And, of course, all of you know that WGON is the company, it's actually the TV station that Stephen flies a helicopter for in Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead. When I saw him wearing that shirt, it was in the pages of Geek magazine, and which I actually wrote for, and I couldn't believe it. And that's what led me, the search led me to Last Exit to Nowhere, and I've been buying their shirts ever since. You'll see the Weyland-Yutani shirt. I wear that shirt a lot because I like it. I like it. Now, you might notice, so there we go, Super Psyched. I finally got back to your chat. Tip read it at the top of the hour, so there you go, sir. Speaking of that, I got a little package from our friend Fernando Barrero, which includes this Rocinante. I mean, take a gander at this. Yes. This Rocinante t-shirt, which is similar to the hoodie he already sent me. And in addition, speaking of Spain and Italy, this Spanish Blu-ray for True Lies. Now, this was an official release, unlike the Stinky Tuna release, an official release, which I do have it now because it's in my hand. So thank you, Fernando. He also sends along a letter. He even printed it out and signed it. Allow me to read. This is actually dated July 5th, 2021. So, gosh, he wrote this yesterday. Hi, RMB. I hope you and everyone close to you are doing well. I know that I've already sent you a hooded Expanse Rocinante sweatshirt, but I wanted to send you something you can wear now during the summer months. Cha-ching! Also, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that two films you wish you had on Blu-ray were True Lies and The Abyss. Yes. Unfortunately, finding a Blu-ray edition of the latter proved too challenging. There isn't one. But I was able to find a version of the former from Spain, the only place it ever came out. Don't worry, there's an English audio option on the Blu-ray. I also wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the exposure and success that Tango Shalom has received. My question to you would be if there are any new experiences that you have learned recently with this film that perhaps you did not have to go through or did not know from your days of putting Free Enterprise together. I ask because I always enjoy stories you tell from your experiences when you answer certain questions. In any case, I wish you continued success and hope to appear again on either of your Robservations shows. I had fun appearing on your Midnighter episode 2, although I have to admit, being on the East Coast and waiting for 3 a.m. for the Midnighter can be challenging at times. In the meantime, thanks for all you do, and stay metal. That comes from Fernando Barrero. P.S. I've taken your reading suggestions and purchased the novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson and have started reading Mary D. Russell's The Sparrow. Both are very fine science fiction novels. The Sparrow is fantastic, and Snow Crash might be one of the more entertaining books I've ever read in my life. So I expect a review of both of those. Fernando, thank you so much. It's very touching when people go out of their way and send me cool shit. Like, I don't expect it. It's not necessary, but it's certainly very much appreciated. Interestingly enough, your package came in the mail the same day as my 4K Donnie Darko replacement disc showed up. Thank you, Arrow. I didn't even have to do anything. They just sent it to me because I ordered it directly from them, and they realized when there was a mistake, they just got out. They took out that sales list. People they'd sent discs to, or they just sent me a replacement disc. God love you, Arrow. God love you. So, I believe that's all the stuff we have to take care of right at this moment. That's all the outstanding business, other than the award show for the film festival, which is coming. So, all my life, people have been making fun of my various geek interests. Now, they can't make fun of me so much because, I was a relatively well-adjusted kid. I had friends. I was very social. I was sort of closeted about my extreme interests. I mean, people know that I love Star Trek and Star Wars and science fiction and movies and things like that. But, nobody really gave me a hard time about it until I actually got into junior high school. And I did things like wear a Star Trek uniform to school, and I got beat up the day Star Trek the Motion Picture opened. And there was one time this kid used to harass me, and he would call me a Star Wars freako, which really didn't work because everyone loved Star Wars. So, by the way, his name was Brad Koval, and I used to call him Bwad. Bwad had more to say to me. I'm sure he's a fine man now. He was a grade ahead of me, so he's like in his mid-50s, Bwad. Star Wars freako. Well, you know what? I invite you to watch. I will invite myself to watch your YouTube channel. Just kidding. I know you don't have one. But anyway, there was always a little bit of, I remember I had this teacher I had a crush on in high school named Carol Penke. And I loved her. And it was an honors course I was taking, Utopia. She was a great teacher, and I totally had a crush on her. But she would give me shit for, liking comic books. And I've told this story before, but I would bring comic books in. By the way, I'm going to get back to your question in a minute, Fernando. I brought her an issue of Moon Knight. I think it was issue 14, the first stained glass Scarlet Sword, very much in the vein of film noir. And of course, it wasn't necessarily groundbreaking in its storytelling because it was full of film noir tropes, which she could immediately recognize. But I'm like, look, there's more going on here. I mean, there was I think a feeling amongst many people, that comic books are sort of a ghettoized genre. And I mean ghettoized like the Jews being rounded up and put into a Polish ghetto. That kind of a ghetto, where these were not worthy stories of I don't know what, but that it was not material that was to be taken seriously. And that was I thought, a very provincial and a very American attitude, because graphic storytelling had a rich tradition in Asian countries and in European countries. So the idea that predominantly comic books in this country were aimed at, well, let's say they were fairly lowbrow. But what happened in the 80s is, especially even in comic book storytelling, when Frank Miller was doing things like Ronin and The Dark Knight Returns, and Alan Moore was on Swamp Thing and then wrote Watchmen, and Howard Chaykin did American Flag. That was just the beginning of a deluge, a renaissance of comic book storytelling in this country. Neil Gaiman on Sandman, which is still my favorite comic series of all time because it's actually about storytelling. And there was a little bit of respectability that came with that, and people were re-examining comics. Art Spiegelman's Mouse, for instance. There was a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. So most people still looked down upon comic books. Now, also, as a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, those were genres also always looked down upon. I mean, certainly sometimes somebody would write an academic study of the horror movie and delve into its themes and things like that. Science fiction films were not even as respectable as horror movies were, because horror films, they came out of the Gothic tradition, and Mary Shelley and the postmodern Prometheus and Bram Stoker, and there was a literary aspect to it. I mean, science fiction, it didn't go back that far. Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, it wasn't Flights of Fancy, even though people who weren't really that familiar with science fiction could easily write it off, but those who'd actually delved into sci-fi's literature might come away with it with a little something different. But certainly science fiction movies were not necessarily respectable. Giant insects, giant monsters, aliens from space. There weren't a lot of highbrow science fiction. I mean, I guess you could go back and call Fritz Lang's 1927 masterpiece Metropolis great piece, still one of the greatest science fiction movies ever made. The Forbidden Planet from 1957 was a retelling of Shakespeare's The Tempest, so that gave it a little bit of credibility. And, of course, Byron Haskin's War of the Worlds, my favorite movie when I was a kid. That was 1953. And then you had Day the Earth Stood Still. So there were some respectable science fiction films. And then as we moved into the 60s, the granddaddy of all respectable science fiction movies, 2001, probably still unparalleled in terms of a meditation on the universe and humanity's place in it, which, after all, isn't that what science fiction is all about? Then, of course, we got Planet of the Apes and the dystopian movies of the 70s. And then, of course, Star Wars and everything that came after. So I call this the post-geek singularity because all of these things became respectable. Comic book storytelling, science fiction and horror and fantasy films, all of it became respectable. A horror movie was, maybe The Exorcist should have won, and I think it should have won Best Picture. It's a fantastic movie, but they weren't ready yet. They're not going to ever award an Academy Award to a movie where a 12-year-old girl, albeit possessed by a demon, says, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." That's just not going to fly. But anyway, maybe it would today. I don't know. But it wasn't until things like Silence of the Lambs were winning awards. I mean, 2 acting awards. Suddenly there's respectability. Of course, Lord of the Rings, even though it was a literary property. So comic books, science fiction, fantasy, and horror as movies, and then comic books also gained a little respectability, except in one place, in the cinema. How many op-ed pieces or how many stories have you read about whether it's Martin Scorsese talking about the death of cinema because of superhero movies? But what is so strange to me, and what I always thought about as superhero movies, I mean, superheroes are just, they might as well be knights in shining armor, or cops, or our military. I mean, how many movies about World War II were there made? Or World War I before that, or Vietnam? No one said there's been too many movies about World War II. There were hundreds of movies made about World War II. But no one said, they're choking our theaters. But because ultimately, comic book movies are I think in certain circles, they're poo-pooed the same way comic books used to be poo-pooed by the literary intelligentsia. And nowadays, comic book films are just choking the theaters out. Well, what are they but just new iterations of war films, or cop films, or knight in shining armor movies, or sword and sandal epics? It's just a different genre updated. Samurai movies, the Western. That's all comic book movies are. And of course, coupled with their great success, there's a lot of resentment toward those films. Now, I understand. If you're a cineast, as I am, I mean, yes, I have my Wong Kar-wai box set. I have my Ingmar Bergman box set. I've got my Hitchcock box set. I've got my Truffaut box set. I mean, I like movies of all kinds. Everyone knows my Antonioni trilogy. The Ennui trilogy is something that is near and dear to me. They're about as far away from comic book movies as you can get. Tarkovsky, I just pre-ordered The Mirror from Criterion. I love Tarkovsky. Some people think watching a Tarkovsky movie is like watching paint dry. I am not one of them. But anyway, this idea that because comic book films have taken over the box office, well, I mean, people grew up, we live in the post-geek singularity. People like myself, when I was a little kid, reading comics, watching the hour-long version of Super Friends before it gave way to the half-an-hour version with the Legion of Doom and all that, watching Spider-Man on the Electric Company. We grew up with this stuff. So it's ingrained in us, and as we've grown up, there's been an air of respectability around superheroes. And if you look at what the triumph of the Marvel Universe, which now we're in the middle of a huge fanboy backlash, which I get it. But for the most part, the entire Infinity Saga, take those 23 films, this is an unparalleled achievement in fantasy filmmaking. And ultimately, those movies are about human truth the same way Antonioni's movies are. It's just they go about it in a different way. They're still addressing the great human truths. I mean, what does it mean to live in a surveillance state? Do you have to watch the lives of others to get something like that into your brain? Or can you get it from Captain America the Winter Soldier? I mean, the first Iron Man, take away the fact that it's called Iron Man, you could tell the exact same story about a scion of a wealthy family that ended up having second thoughts about what his family business was, which was hurting people, having a crisis of conscience, and ending up taking on his mentor. Maybe it could have been a legal battle, and Paul Newman would have come in and fought that battle. But in the case of Iron Man, no. Tony Stark made his Iron Man suit and ended up going against Obadiah Stane, who had Ironmonger. But you could have taken the comic book elements away from that story and made it independently, and people would have lauded it as, oh, this is a great examination of one man's crisis of conscience. But you wrap it in an Iron Man bow, and everyone's like, well, no, this is just the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the downfall of all cinema. I mean, people see what they want to see. Now, I understand the one thing that comic book movies have done is their resounding success has made it very difficult to get other kinds of movies made. I don't know if my beloved The Verdict, Sidney Lumet's The Verdict, could Sidney Lumet even get a movie made today? I don't know. Because right now we're going through our comic book phase. But remember, at the same time, we are still getting movies like Moonlight and like Nomadland and movies like that. And so there's still a lot of vibrant cinema being made across the planet. It's just not filling up the theaters. The studios aren't making those movies anymore because the business of Hollywood has changed, as it always has. I mean, before, Hollywood made lots of musicals, lots of upbeat studio pictures, and that kind of drove them into a wall in the 60s until, hey, they were replaced by the enfants terribles that came along and changed the studio system in the late 60s and 70s. So it's always a process. It's an ongoing process. Which brings me to Stephen Dorff. Now, Stephen Dorff is an actor. For those of you who don't know Stephen Dorff, here Stephen Dorff is on my thumbnail. There, of course, he's starring in Blade, a Marvel movie back from 1998. Deacon Frost. He was really good in Blade. I thought he did a great job. You know why he was good in Blade? Pretty good actor. He was able to say, you know what? What is it like to be a vampire? I'm going to bring my acting chops, and I'm going to bring something to that. Now, I wonder if when he was going in for Stephen Norrington doing auditions for Blade, if he thought to himself, I'm not going to do this shit. I'm embarrassed if I get this part. I don't want to be in this movie. Why would I want to be in a Marvel movie where I play a vampire? I mean, come on. It's not Paths of Glory. It's not Lolita. It's not Doctor Strangelove or even 2001. I mean, I could have been Frank Poole if I was working for Kubrick. But no, he was Deacon Frost. He also worked for Uwe Boll in Alone in the Dark. Uwe Boll, one of the great auteurs of our time. But so, we've all heard about it. If you've spent any time online, you've heard about his comments that he dropped. Here they are. And this appeared in the Hollywood Reporter today. This was published at 6:56 a.m., written by Ryan Parker. Blade star Stephen Dorff blasts Marvel films. Embarrassed for Black Widow star Scarlett Johansson. Stephen Dorff did not hold back in a recent interview where he skewered modern superhero movies, targeting specifically the upcoming Marvel film Black Widow. Although he played villain Deacon Frost in 1998's Blade, yes, a Marvel property but distributed by New Line Cinema, the 47-year-old Dorff told the UK's Independent in a story published Monday that current superhero films are what is wrong with the business. Quote, I still hunt out the good shit because I don't want to be in Black Widow, the True Detective actor told the newspaper. It looks like garbage to me. It looks like a bad video game. I'm embarrassed for these people. I'm embarrassed for Scarlett. I'm sure she got paid $5-7 million bucks, but I'm embarrassed for her. I don't want to be in those movies. I really don't. I'll find that kid director that's going to be the next Stanley Kubrick, and I'll act for him instead. Dorff, who most recently starred in the mixed martial arts-centered film Embattled, also unloaded on this year's Academy Awards ceremony, which was presented vastly differently due to the pandemic. Quote, this year's Oscars were the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen, he told the newspaper. Excuse me, my business is becoming a big game show. You have actors that don't have a clue what they're doing. You have filmmakers that don't have a clue what they're doing. We're all in these little boxes on these streamers, TV and film. It's all one big clusterfuck of content now. Dorff is hardly the first within Hollywood or even to previously star in a Marvel property to criticize Marvel and DC films and question the picture's artistic integrity. Last month, the Incredible Hulk TV series star Lou Ferrigno took a shot at MCU and DCU when he tweeted, can't think of another superhero that isn't in costume or CGI. I worked damn hard on my diet and exercise for the Hulk. Wasn't going to let anyone down. The Hulk was my hero as a kid as well. Hashtag Hulk series. Hashtag OG Hulk. Hashtag no CGI involved. Hashtag diet and exercise. Hashtag Lou Ferrigno. Hashtag don't make me angry. Prior to that, there was a big dust-up when Martin Scorsese said Marvel films aren't cinema. Even though he was blasted by fans and Marvel filmmakers, the Oscar-winning director stood by his opinion. With all due respect to Mr. Ferrigno, have you looked at Chris Evans? Have you looked at Chris Hemsworth? Hell, did you look at Chris Pratt when he first played Star-Lord? What are you talking about? Did you look at Wolverine in Logan? These actors are on incredible nutrition and workout regimens, and they look fucking phenomenal. And I don't want to take anything away from the work that you did, Mr. Ferrigno, but it isn't fair to call people out like that because a cursory glance at any article on the internet would tell you just how hard these guys work. I personally took a camera with me and filmed one of Brandon Routh's daily workouts for Superman Returns. He got huge, and he had to do that every day for a year. I watched it firsthand. It's on my documentary. So the idea that people don't have to work hard, no one has CGI muscles. Yeah, of course, Thanos is a CG creation, sure. But you know what? Josh Brolin got pretty swole to play Cable. And I just think that what's the point of going out and criticizing people for doing good work? As if it's easy to make these movies. You know, for every successful Marvel Cinematic Universe film, I'd go back and look at Elektra. No offense to the people that made that. Rob Bowman, I'm a fan of yours. You know, I understand. I don't blame you. But look at, like, the second Ghost Rider movie. It's not... Look at Pitoff's Catwoman. I mean, it's not like these movies can't go horribly awry. I'm looking at you, Batman and Robin. Rest in peace, Joel Schumacher. But this idea that these movies are somehow easy to make, that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is just a given, like, we just toss these movies off. You know, it's not like we pre-planned them years in advance. It's not like we found the perfect people to be in these movies. It's not like we're trying not to make, the best movies we possibly can, and certainly the best movies that have been made in this genre. And if not the best, then collectively, we're trying to do something storytelling-wise that hasn't been done in movies. Oh, and by the way, let's not even talk about the box office. If this mic, I pick it up and drop it to illustrate the point. I mean, I don't understand. What is there to be embarrassed about, Stephen Dorff? You know, maybe one day you would be in one of these movies. But to me, it's the same thing that's gone on. I saw it since I was a kid. And it came with, oh, these guys are just nerds. Yeah, really? We live in nerd nirvana. Nerd nirvana is all around us. And we're living in it because of people growing up with this material and loving this material and growing up and becoming purveyors of this material. You think James Gunn working on Tromeo and Juliet and then writing the specials and starring as Minute Man and then going on and making Slither and Super is going to apologize for Guardians of the Galaxy or Suicide Squad? Why? Why would you possibly do that? Everything he learned making, working for Lloyd Kaufman at Troma is what made him be able to make Suicide Squad. And I've listened to this my whole life. Oh, Rob, you're a Star Wars freako. Right. The problem is not with comic book movies or Star Trek or Star Wars. The problem is with people making bad comic book movies and bad Star Trek and bad Star Wars. And you know what? Well, Rob, how do you judge those things? How do you judge whether things are bad or not? I don't have to judge them. History will judge them. The things that resonate are passed down from generation to generation. The movies that people love are passed down. You know, I didn't particularly think that Roadhouse was a great movie when I saw it. I didn't like Goonies at all. But in the wake of Richard Donner's death, boy, let me tell you, I mentioned I don't like Goonies. Right now, I'm sure somebody's already going in the comments, what? How can you not like Goonies? Hey, you guys, I don't. Anyway, but I don't begrudge you for liking it. But that's the thing. History will judge these movies. And I'll tell you, as somebody who has watched movies from all around the world, and I like all kinds of movies, I put on Infinity War and Endgame, and I love them because they are the realization of what I wanted to see when I was a kid. Now, Quentin Tarantino recently came out and said that he's not a big fan of the Marvel stuff anyway. He wished it would have come out in the 80s. Well, we didn't have the technology to do it in the 80s. And I understand what he means. Because when I sit down and watch the movies that I love over and over and over again, it used to be things like Empire Strikes Back. I don't do that. You know, I tend to watch movies that are much more down to earth. I love my fantasy cinema, but I don't watch it over and over and over again. I watch movies like All That Jazz, or I watch The Godfather or Goodfellas, or I watch, well, Jaws kind of skirts that. Jaws is both a great 70s movie and it's a great popcorn adventure. But, I watch all kinds of movies, foreign films, movies from all over the world. You know, I'll watch Wild Strawberries or Persona, or I'll pull down a Kieslowski movie, whether it's Red, White, and Blue, or whether it's, The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. You know, I'll watch any of those things. Investigation of a Citizen Under Suspicion, by Emilio Petri. So I will watch all kinds of movies, but I'm still going to love comic book films. There's a place for all of these things. And I appreciate Mr. Dorff saying that he's waiting to find the next Stanley Kubrick. But how do you know the next Stanley Kubrick isn't going to be directing the next Marvel film? And as I pointed out, Scarlett Johansson is a producer on Black Widow. And as Kevin Feige has said, the director of the film that she brought in, she stood behind her and brought in the director and said, this is a female director I think that we should be working with. I stand behind her, and Marvel's like, okay. And that was a ballsy move on Scarlett Johansson's part. So not only was Scarlett Johansson acting in the film, she also brought in the director. That's producing. She earned her producing keep, and you're going off on her? We really need to start really thinking about when we're going after people online. I don't mind going after people whose work you think is substandard. I certainly do it with the modern Star Trek all the time. I'm not necessarily going after people, but I'm going after the work that they turn out because the resources and the money they have is more than Star Trek has ever had. So theoretically, as Chris Gore pointed out, they should be making the best Star Trek ever made. The problem is they've got all the resources, but they don't have the writing. And that's where it falls down. And the writing can be put squarely on the people writing the scripts. You've got everything you need. Star Trek should be the best Star Trek ever made, and it's not. And, people would say, well, that's your opinion, Rob. No, but I think we all know what good storytelling is. And you know what? You can put it up to analysis. That's why people go to screenwriting courses. That's why people teach screenwriting courses. That's why there's books written about how to write screenplays. I'll give you an example, for instance. People talk about how I really did not like The Force Awakens at all. Why did I not like it as much as matter of fact, why did I hate that movie as much as I did? Well, remember, now you're part of a series. You're episode 7 in a series. And do you think that The Force Awakens was a great follow-up to Return of the Jedi? I know 30 years have gone by, but really? There was no progression. We didn't get to see anything. It was already, we defeated the Emperor and the galaxy is liberated. And in the next movie, nope. Status quo is all the same. Nothing's changed, which makes our characters idiots. That's what I objected to, is that, wow, you were so uncreative that you just decided to, there's just going to be another empire and another super weapon and all this stuff. But you're part of a series, guys. You've got 6 movies before you. Now you have to make sense of what came before in your script. Well, you didn't do that. None of it made any sense. And worse than that, our characters are idiots for allowing the First Order to arise, much less build Starkiller Base. Like what? They couldn't. How many contractors existed? I mean, you go back to that Kevin Smith thing about the innocent contractors on the Death Star. How many people did it take, or how many droids, how much, whatever, manpower, droid power, whatever power you needed, Twi'lek power to build Starkiller Base? What? No one knew about that? The Republic's like, let them build their super weapon. What's the worst that can happen? I don't know. 5 inner planets being destroyed all at once. I mean, that was bad writing. I sit there and I'm like, well, that's nonsensically stupid. I mean, this is where the ire should come. Not the fact that somebody's successful. You know why? Here's my old adage that I learned from a director who was insufferable, but he made a good movie, and that's why I work for him. And I've said it before. It doesn't matter how good somebody else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse. Don't sing your Smith song about what happens when your friends get successful. I mean, that's a bunch of bullshit. Be happy with people's success. Hate the work, but don't hate the people that made it. Don't begrudge anybody that got a great job, that made some good money, that got involved in Marvel and made a shit ton of cash. That's going to eat you up inside. Figure out your own path. Go find something to do. Take them as an example and inspire to do what they did. But don't get angry about it. And to sit there and talk about, well, I'm embarrassed for Scarlett Johansson. Really? Do you think Miss Cortland, who directed the new Black Widow movie, is going to say, "Oh, I'm embarrassed for her too"? No. Scarlett Johansson put her neck on the line for the director of that movie with Marvel. She used her clout that she earned over 10 years and made sure Black Widow, she was working with somebody she could trust, which probably made her performance better. Certainly they got someone like Florence Pugh to play Yelena, and that turned out well. So before you've even seen the movie, you're slagging off on it. It's bad form, man. And I'll tell you something else. I'm sick and tired of listening to people ghettoize these genres. I really am. Because they're movies that make people happy. And they're not easy to make. You think it's easy to make one of these movies? No, man. It's like every other movie. When you see a great movie, it is like alchemy. It is Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold. It's really hard to make a good movie, much less 23 interlocking movies, of which this is now the 24th, the beginning of the real Phase 4. Let's hope it's good. Let's hope the thousands of people that worked on this can look back on this movie and go, you know what, I'm really proud of that movie. What's the point of saying I would be embarrassed if I were Scarlett Johansson? I'm certainly not embarrassed for her, and I don't think anybody else is either. I think it's a really stupid thing to say. And look, if you want to save your ire, save it for bad writing. That's where the things are really problematic. Anyway, that's where I am about this. I'm just deliriously excited to go see Black Widow. I'm going to go see that goodness in IMAX at the Chinese. Yes. Can't wait. I thought Army of the Dead was going to be in IMAX. It was not. I should have known better. But anyway, you know who wrote in today? Lubna Khan, our friend Lubna Khan. We haven't heard from Lubna Khan in a while. Hello. I've been meaning to write in for some time, but I've not been able to for various reasons. For one thing, my supposedly good eye, relatively speaking, has been giving me grief. But still, I wish to share a few things that we, my husband and I, have watched not so recently that I enjoyed. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I actually have on my shelf somewhere. This BBC historical fantasy drama is an adaptation of the novel by Susanna Clarke, which I have not read. You should. It's really good. Yet I do own it. My understanding, however, is that it has a rather slow start, and the drama also is a slow burn. Well, you know. Also, that the book has a very accurate depiction of the language, manners, and sea of the time. And this, too, is indeed true of the series. This really does feel like the Regency era, except with magic. Rogue One. Wow. This is the first of the Disney Star Wars movies that I've seen. A good one. I know, shocker. I shan't go into the whole long, boring story, nor all of my highly idiosyncratic reasons for why this is, but it all began when I inadvertently came across the spoiler that Leia and Han were no longer an item, to which my reaction was, what? Why? After which I ceased avoiding spoilers altogether. Suffice to say, at present, I have no inclination to watch the sequel trilogy. I am interested, however, in The Mandalorian and upcoming projects, films, and shows alike. But I digress. Where was I? Oh, yes, Rogue One. I loved it. It had that Star Wars feeling that I found lacking in the prequel trilogy, except for the occasional scene or line here and there. The mixture of action-adventure with humor and characters to love, and everyone knows how this ends, I trust, mourn for. I prefer happy endings myself, but when things don't turn out well, I tend to prefer knowing this in advance, as I do not really bear the misfortunes of others with great fortitude, to paraphrase Captain Marryat. Note, whilst on the subject of Star Wars, while I did not hate the prequel trilogy as many of our generation do, I was born in 1971, I certainly don't love it either. So it was quite funny to me when I first heard that Hayden Christensen was coming back in the Obi-Wan series and found myself cheering. Feeling nostalgia for things you love is one thing. Feeling nostalgia for something you never loved is a somewhat bizarre experience. You're not wrong. Inside Out. I'm assuming that everyone and their dog have already seen this, so I'll content myself with saying that I appreciated the message that sadness has its place in life as well as joy. Lubna. P.S. This year, the Figure Skating World Championships were held here in Sweden, and there are a few programs I wish to share, beginning with Nathan Chen's winning free skate. Ooh. Well, I'm going to put that link in the live chat, and you can watch it. And this is, again, from Lubna. Here you go. There it is. He was simply amazing. He was so completely in his zone, it seemed he couldn't make a mistake. 5 quads, 4 revolution jumps, and I also enjoyed the program, which quite possibly might be my favorite of his 3-time world champion. Once again, that is from Lubna Khan. Lubna, I always enjoy your letters. Say hi to your husband for me, and enjoy Sweden. Do you know Emil Johansson? Anyway, good to hear from you. And I love, you know what? I don't care if you're watching a movie that was made 50 years ago for the first time. It's one of my favorite things. I love to hear about people who are coming across something for the first time and finally watching it. Maybe that's why I love watching reaction videos of, like, Twins the New Trend. When I started watching them until their YouTube channels hit almost 1 million subscribers, then I too feel jealous, like Stephen Dorff, of Scarlett Johansson. So I'm not beyond that. Anyway, thanks for the letter. Appreciate it. Thank you for writing in. As you know, Dieter Bastian wrote a very funny letter, which I read on the show the other day on Let's Get Physical Media, about why he should be a guest on Whining About Movies. But, yeah, there you go. And he makes a compelling argument, but I already read it, so I'm not going to read it again. This one comes from Ray Rivera. Dear Robert, I'm writing to share a discovery I made about Star Trek The Wrath of Khan that I never noticed before, but blew my mind when I did. I recently listened to you and the Critical Drinker discuss Star Trek The Motion Picture, another one I love, and I wanted to share this with you. Oh, I've got another editorial comment. I watched Wrath of Khan when it came out. I was 12, and I've seen it many times subsequently. Only now at the age of 50, I appreciated something I'd never noticed before, and in many Star Trek discussions have never noticed anyone else discuss. In the first act of the film, it's Kirk's birthday, and Spock gives him the gift of Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities. Now, full disclosure, I've never read this novel, but I've seen a film version, and through a bit of cultural osmosis, happen to know the very first and last lines of the book. In Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, Kirk reads the very famous first line, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." and asked Spock if there's some kind of message there. Spock replies, "None that I'm conscious of, except, of course, happy birthday." However, the also famous last line of the novel does bear a message. At the end of the novel, one character essentially sacrifices himself to save another and puts himself in his place to be executed. On the way to the guillotine, he utters the novel's famous last line. "It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. A far better sleep I go to than I have ever known." There was a message there, though neither Spock nor Kirk knew it yet. It was a message from the screenwriters to the audience. Well, it was actually screenwriter because it was all Nicholas Meyer. Jack B. Soward's, he was completely rewritten. It was not the line from the beginning of the book, and it was not evident at the beginning of Star Trek II, but rather the line from the end of Dickens' book. It only becomes apparent at the end of Wrath of Khan. Having seen this film so many times between age 12 and age 50, it amazes me that I can still discover nuances in the writing that I had never noticed before. That's a testament to smart sci-fi storytelling. Now it is possible I'm imagining this clever subversive literary foreshadowing, but having noticed it, it feels too on the nose to be accidental. Had you ever noticed this? And do you think the writers intended this? Or is it simply serendipitous writing? At any rate, I love this movie, and I also love hearing you talk about films. Live long and prosper, Robert. Well, no, it was not luck. It was absolutely 100% intentional. And I had not read A Tale of Two Cities until I saw this movie back in '82. I had to go read it. I mean, whenever somebody brings up literature and Star Trek, I feel like it's my civic duty to go read whatever it is, whether it was Shakespeare, John Mansfield, or Charles Dickens. And A Tale of Two Cities. I have my copy of Tale of Two Cities over there. I stole it actually from my grandfather, who he had these books that he had in Princeton, and I took them from him. I took the whole set. I've got a whole set of them down over there in the Robservatory. Vintage books that are almost 100 years old. But yes, I took those for myself, and that's when I read the book, and it was very apparent that that's what they were doing. And even Kirk says in the movie something Spock was trying to tell me on my birthday, even though he wasn't trying to tell him that. But that's what that movie's all about. Spock went to the guillotine, and it's absolutely there, and it was intentional. That's why it's always better when you're writing good science fiction to have, especially Star Trek, to have people that have a background in literature that can make those connections. And Nicholas Meyer, let's face it, in Star Trek 6 goes a little over the top. You haven't read it in the original Klingon. Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. He goes a little overboard, but still, what can you do? But great letter. Thank you for writing it in. This letter comes from Paul in Long Beach. Holy pig, Batman, you need to read this, Rob. Radioactive hybrid terror pigs have made themselves a home in Fukushima's exclusion zone. By the way, this is real. This was written by Matt Dupuis on July 1st, 2021, and this was sent to us by Paul in Long Beach. Scientists have discovered a new threat to humanity, emerging in the area surrounding the former Fukushima nuclear power plant. Indestructible radioactive hybrid terror pigs. This is not a joke. The details emerged from studies of how radiation from the partial nuclear meltdown of the plant in 2011 had affected local wildlife, which has in many cases rewilded urban areas vacated years ago by populations forced to move out by the threat of radiation following the disaster. This is a familiar process following large-scale human evacuations and similar rewilding situations occurring in the areas surrounding the site of the Chernobyl incident in 1986, despite the efforts of the Soviet authorities to control the animal population. The NBC-suited boffins working on the project were expecting to find wild boar in the affected zone since they've been reported in former urban areas for some years, having come down from the surrounding mountains to reclaim the towns and cities in the area as their own realm almost as soon as humans vacated them. However, the scientists were not prepared for the true prospect that awaited them, as related in a report in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B Journal. The local wild boar, a subspecies endemic to the region known as the Japanese boar, aka Suscrofa, I can't even pronounce this, or white mustachioed pig, having created a fiefdom covering all the locale vacated by over 160,000 displaced humans, became cocky and aggressive, and also lost their natural wariness. The marauding boars also began interbreeding with the escaped domestic pigs that had made good with their trotters from local farms after their human keepers had been forced to flee. The pigs, for their part, were ill-suited to life in a wild, radioactive, post-apocalyptic hellscape and presumably threw in their lot with the tough, wily boar as their best chance of survival. The result was a new kind of boar-pig hybrid that originated in the initial exclusion zone within 20 kilometers of the site of the nuclear plant, where radiation levels were presumably highest. The study found that the hybrids did not display any signs of mutation despite the doses of radiation they were subjected to. Indeed, surveys of the local boar population found they are contaminated by up to 300 times the safe human dosage of the lethal isotope cesium-137. In other words, they are highly radioactive and seemingly virtually indestructible. These hybrids now comprise up to 10% of the local population, evidently combining the wild smarts of their boar ancestors with an enjoyment of the finer things which human civilization can bring, inherited from their domestic forebears. This is presumably why humans attempting to reclaim their former settlements in the area around the Fukushima plant for eventual reopening have found it difficult to dislodge the porcine interlopers from their recently taken strongholds. This is awesome. The Fukushima exclusion zones have been gradually lifted in stages since the incident to allow former residents to return. In some cases, the aggressive porkers have refused to give ground and have attacked returning humans, meaning human authorities have been forced to deploy armed assassination teams of hunters to flush them out. The future of the Fukushima terror pigs is hard to predict. If they had the intelligence to team up and combine into one unstoppable force, an indestructible boar army of that nature would surely be able to overrun the rest of the Japanese archipelago and the the register, possibly the whole world. Unfortunately for the boar, although they naturally live in matriarchal groups called sounders, their natural aggression and territorial nature means that it would be very much out of character for the Fukushima boar to combine into one huge terrifying unit, whether for the purposes of destroying human civilization or any other reason. The ecology boffins who study them suggest that while the hybridization of the two species appears to have had no ill effects on the resulting animals, the pig genes in their makeup will eventually spread and dilute as the hybrid animals move further from their ground zero birthplace until eventually the introgressed genes will eventually disappear in this area. The superior firepower and coordination of their human usurpers mean the boar will hopefully be forced back into the mountains, where their desire for the trappings of human culture will gradually dissipate, and the memory of their time as unquestioned warlord rulers of the region will slowly fade. Generations of boar to come will look down on human settlements from their mountain redoubts and feel a pang of regret and recognition for a missed opportunity to conquer the world. The Boer War has been avoided, but at what cost to the boar? Well, Paul in Long Beach, this is exactly the kind of article. I'm going to put this. I think everybody should share this. This is a hilarious read. Paul in Long Beach, thank you for that, because that's exactly the kind of thing we all have to worry about. Although, would our boar overlords do any worse than we would? I bet they wouldn't pollute the environment the way we do. You never know. You never know. Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. Would you believe this letter comes from Omar94? This was something I thought about when I was asked the question, when the question was asked on the John Campea show some time ago, where someone asked if Fast 9 or Black Widow would pass the 100 million mark. Since Fast 9 made 70 million on its opening weekend and Black Widow comes out next week, or now this week, we will see what happens with the opening weekends. Since the pandemic has affected movie-going, though theaters are starting to allow full capacity with seating, who knows how long it will take for a movie to reach the 100 million or more mark. It is possible we could see a 100 million plus opening weekend for another movie later this year, probably an MCU movie, if I were to take a guess. But I'm not sure entirely, since there are those who are still reluctant to return to theaters. That was just something I thought about. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Omar, I'm going to go all in, man. I'm betting that $100 million is what Black Widow is going to earn, including Thursday night. I think it's going to do it. I would expect it to. Fast 9 open the floodgates. So we'll see. But I could see that happening. I could totally see that happening. Yeah, why not? Why not? So, yeah. Anyway, I think, somebody's going to make that money. Someday it's going to happen. Probably sooner than later. So I'm gonna go all in and bet Black Widow is going to make $100 million. I really think it is. Let's see what you people have to say. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Let's see what you have to say here. That was from last night. Willow, always in with the first tip. Willow, thank you so much. Your ongoing support means the world. Willow says, happy belated 4th of July. Is there a non-traditional food that you like to barbecue? I normally don't like cooked fruits, but I think that grilled pineapple tastes better than raw pineapple. Willow, I think most anything tastes better off of a grill. I mean, I don't know if anything's non-traditional, like meats. I love grilled fish. I love grilled corn on the cob. I love to grill corn on the cob. But I think grilled vegetables are the bomb diggity, to be honest. Almost any vegetable. Grill up any vegetable. And grilled fruit, too. Grilled pineapple I actually do like quite a bit. Put a little char on it. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think that's non-traditional because, like, if you roast a pig over a spit, if you go to a luau in, like, Hawaii, you can taste some grilled pineapple sometimes, and it's delicioso. I like it a lot better. I like most things grilled better than I like them any other way. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Yerke sends in a tip. Thank you for the tip, Jeff. Hi, Rob, and greetings from Northern California. I'm still alive. Thanks to Mrs. Yerke. And I want to put in a word for the 1990s series Sharp's Rifles. Wow, I've never seen it. Sean Bean brings it in this early 1800s series with Brian Cox, Daniel Craig, Pete Postlethwaite, and Liz Hurley. Live long and prosper, the Yerk Man. Wow, Jeff. Now, I have never, ever heard of this show. But Sharp's Rifles must be a British show. I've never heard it. It's probably streaming somewhere now. What a cast, though. My God. Sean Bean with Brian Cox, Daniel Craig, Pete Postlethwaite, and Liz Hurley. Sign me up. Live long and prosper, the Yerk Man. Well, Jeff Yerke hurt his back badly. He broke his back earlier this year, but he's a great friend of the channel. By the way, sends in a diamond super sticker in the live chat. Thank you for that. But Jeff hurt his back, and his wife, Mrs. Y, has been nursing him back to health. They're definitely foundational members of the Post-Geek Singularity here, and it's good to hear him getting better. House Atreides. House Atreides says, hi, Rob. Really enjoyed your Axanar videos. Real eye-opener. You can see it in the Axanar interlude. Serious downgrade from Prelude to Axanar. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, so for those of you who don't know, I was involved. I haven't been since November of 2017, but you can watch videos. I made some videos about them, but I was involved in the Axanar film project, which it started out great. I'm very proud of Prelude to Axanar, and I did a proof of concept scene called the Vulcan scene, the Axanar the Vulcan scene, which you can watch, which I directed and co-wrote and edited and produced and designed to show that we could make a Star Trek feature film that might be able to rival the quality of the studios. But that Vulcan scene was designed to be a proof of concept to get more money, and we were definitely on the road to making that. I wound up as the second director of the project after Christian Gossett left. But we were working diligently to do that. I had done over 80 effect shots for the feature that you can also see on the Burnettwork on the Axanar playlist, and I was working on that. We got sued. We got sued because rather than shut up and just make our movie, we made a lot of money. We were very public about what we were doing, and CBS came after us. Didn't come after me because I had nothing to do with the money. They came after Alec Peters, whose idea it was. And, we haven't made anything. It's now been this month. It will be 6 years since anything from Axanar proper was made. Jonathan Lane, the quisling, toady, boot-licking man that he is, who does Fan Film Factor. And by the way, I say that with all sincerity. He stood by and he was happy to use the fruits of our labor to make his own fan film. At the same time, Alec Peters stood back and intentionally tried to hurt many people that formerly worked on Axanar, coming after us legally. I mean, Alec Peters sued me in Georgia and came up with all kinds of bullshit, saying all these things that I had done, which is utterly ridiculous. Having worked, I stood by him all the way during the lawsuit. You'd think that would buy you something. But you know what? When talentless, narcissistic hacks don't have anyone left that can make what they need, if they can't do it themselves, they just get mad at the people that left them in a lurch. Well, here's a professional pro tip for all of you. If you find people that really know what they're doing, and you're the person that doesn't know what you're doing, so what you do is you let the talented people do what they do, you stand back and take the credit. That's what any effective, smart producer does. You don't go after the people that did all the work for you. And by the way, for Jonathan Lane, personal and confidential, Jonathan, you know what? When you're shooting on Dean Newbury's sets that he built by hand, while at the same time Alec Peters is needlessly suing Dean when he's a family man and has relationships with people, you should remember think about what you stand for, because you are the worst of us. You are the worst of us. So you and your Fan Film Factor blog, I don't think I know anyone who's more critical in the entire film business. Well, you're not really in the business. You're a wannabe. But you know what? That's what I have to say about you, sir. And you're the worst. I mean, Alec Peters knows he's a narcissist. Alec Peters knows what he's trying to do. But you think you're hiding behind being respectable and supporting fan films, when at the same time you stand by and allow those same people to be abused and threatened and besmirched by your Trump god, Alec Peters. So anyway, that's just an aside. But I really appreciate, House Tradies, that you like what I had to say about Axanar. So, there you go. Sorry for that little rant. I can't abide both of those guys, because rather than Alec Peters going and making his 2 15-minute shorts, for the last 6 years, he's done nothing. Nothing. I worked my ass off on that project, and he ran it into the ground. And you know what? I worked on that project for three and a half years. And, to see what it became, really maddening. But I appreciate that you like my videos. Robert Fogarty became a member of the channel. Thanks, Robert. Do you go by Bob? Good to have you. Emil Johansson is here and says, this is a top-notch talk. A great episode. Well, thanks, Emil Johansson. I appreciate you saying so. Stubble McShave says, I saw the Val Kilmer trailer on Amazon Prime's YouTube channel. The documentary seems somewhat interesting. I think I'll check it out when it's released. Oh, man, Stubble, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't know this until I watched the trailer, there is a documentary that's going to be on Amazon that's at Cannes right now called Val. Apparently, Val Kilmer, from the very beginnings of his career, carried a video camera around and filmed a lot of shit on all the movies he was on. The Doors, Real Genius, Top Secret, Tombstone, Top Gun. And he made all these tapes with all the people you'd expect to be in this footage. And they cut it all together. Of course, he's been battling throat cancer and trying to come back. It's incredible. And the footage looks incredible. Run, don't walk. Don't do it right now. Wait till I'm done. You don't have to. But the trailer for Val, man, I saw that and I was like, oh my God, how cool is that? Pretty damn cool. Pretty damn cool. Let's see. So, yes, that's amazing. Emil Johansson comes back and says, Kevin Feige should totally listen to all of this constructive criticism and stop making Marvel movies and start making, I don't know, maybe mobster movies instead. It would be a better career choice for sure. Yeah, I'm sure Kevin Feige just cries himself to sleep every night thinking, God damn it. Why didn't I? I don't know. I mean, I worked on 13 Marvel movies before I started the MCU. I mean, of all the people in Hollywood, it's amazing to me. Kevin Feige worked on 13 different Marvel movies, whether they were X-Men movies, Spider-Man movies, Elektra movies, Ghost Rider movies, Daredevil movies, whatever. He worked on 13 Marvel movies, and he saw what worked and what didn't. He learned his craft. He learned to work as a producer on this particular genre of film. And let's face it, Marvel movies are almost a genre unto themselves. Before he started the MCU, which gave him the knowledge, the tools, and the talent to become the Kevin Feige that we all know today. I mean, you'd think that, I don't know, that this was probably the best training a Hollywood producer could have ever had to make the kind of movies that he makes. That's why Kevin Feige's Kevin Feige. I mean, there's a reason he's the most successful producer in Hollywood history, because he put in the work. He put in the time. He knew, he learned, and he's an imagination connoisseur from way back. One day I hope to work for him, or at least just sit down over a few beers, see if I can convince him to give me the hot toy he has of actually himself. That's what I want. I want that Kevin Feige hot toy. 200-watt studio. They made him a hot toy. Can you believe that? I mean, is it wrong that I aspire to have that? I want my own hot toy. But Kevin Feige, I know S-Beam is making me one, not to look a gift horse in the mouth. I appreciate that, S-Beam. Plus, watching you create has been amazing. A 200-watt studio sends in a super chat and says, any word on a Dune 4K delay from Arrow? Apparently, they found audio issues on yet another release and are getting replacement programs set up. Ugh. Well, you know what? They do a good job. You know, problem is less and less people know what to look for. They just don't. There's a lot less institutional knowledge around, so there's mistakes. There's a great article, I'm sure you can do an online search for it, where one of the producers at Arrow, who's working on the Dune disc, is explaining, I'm thinking Legend. I'm getting my wires crossed. Here's what I think. Dune, I didn't hear about Dune being delayed because of sound issues. I did hear about Dune, obviously, Daniel Griffiths from Ballyhoo Films, his documentary, his feature-length documentary, is not going to be on the disc. Apparently, they didn't want to wait for him. Maybe they'll get back to him and get those. If they have audio issues and it has to be delayed, maybe they can get that documentary on there. I think it's a big mistake not to release it. But the problem is there's not enough replication facilities to make physical media anymore. And so if you miss a date, if they miss their window, they might not get their discs replicated before the holiday season, which is why it becomes so crucial. But I haven't heard anything, 200-watt studio, about it. So... yeah, it's kind of a bummer. And, but there's a lot of good stuff still coming out. A lot of good stuff coming out. Alexander Wilson says, what's the Marvel backlash? There isn't a backlash to the Disney Plus shows according to the viewership numbers. Like the great Jay-Z said, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Why do they get you started on Axanar? Well, I think it's not... I think it's a backlash amongst us, the hardcore fan circles. I don't see that there's a backlash, but... I don't feel that there's a backlash from the general population, but I do think that fans are beginning to turn on Marvel, whether they're talking about the socially aware content, which I don't feel that way. The Isaiah Bradley, Sam Wilson stuff that was in Winter Soldier, I thought was great. This is the kind of conversations we should be having. And I thought they were good. I didn't feel that it was inappropriate. And I'll tell you, I got started on Axanar because it was a really good idea at first. And my friend Christian Gossett, who directed Prelude to Axanar, came and asked me to edit it. I was working for CBS at the time, editing and producing the Star Trek documentary, so it was a natural fit for me. And that project went swimmingly well. We raised the money in March, Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, asked for $10,000. We made $100,000 up the production value. We're able to hire actors like Tony Todd and J.G. Hertzler Richard Hatch, and of course Gary Graham, Kate Vernon. It was awesome. We had Academy Award-winning makeup artists. We shot it over 2 days. The whole thing went off without a hitch. Did a third day of pickups. Tobias Richter did the visual effects. Tommy Kraft did the backgrounds. I was cutting it all together. I was given a lot of creative leeway. We put it out. We shot it, I think, beginning of May, and we debuted it at the San Diego Comic-Con in July. It went by the numbers. And then it started to go from there for various reasons, and unfortunately Alec wanted to take over the project, fancied himself a producer, and literally started to get rid of all the people. He got rid of his great team. He did the very last thing that you do. Here's a pro tip. If you've made a movie and you have a great team in place to make the movie, and they made a great movie, and you want to continue making more of these movies of the same ilk, like more Axanar movies, the last thing you do is get rid of those people, even if you don't like them. Because Alec Peters has proven when he started doing that and forcing Christian Gossett to leave, he hasn't produced shit since then. I mean, he had me to do the Vulcan scene for him, but he hasn't made anything in 6 years. 6 years. 2 15-minute shorts. I mean, I've done 50 hours of medical lecture series. It's online. I've done a season of a Netflix animated show, working on season 2. I've edited 3 feature films, and I did, of course, the short film Skyfighter that, oh wait, is 15 minutes. We finished it. We used Tobias Richter to do the effects, who worked on Axanar. We put it out and sold it to the Dust Network. All within the same time. Alec Peters has done exactly 0, but someone else, that bootlicker Jonathan Lade, came on, raised money, and went and shot on the sets that Dean Newbury built, and shot a bunch of other Axanar stuff, but it certainly wasn't up to par with the first Prelude stuff because it wasn't made by professionals. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But there you go. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, "What's up, Rob?" So let me start by saying I like Stephen Dorff as an actor. I do too. I mean, he's been sort of hit and miss for me, but I really enjoyed him when he was playing a Phil Joannou proxy in Phil Joanno's movie Entropy, which was sort of the free enterprise of his life. And I've liked Stephen Dorff in many performances. Didn't he star in Sofia Coppola's movie? Was it Nowhere? I liked him in that. I mean, I think Stephen Dorff is a fine actor. And that's why I don't understand why you come out and say something like this, because, you know, whether you like the Marvel movies or not, a lot of people are doing great work. I mean, certainly you're getting top-notch fantasy entertainment that's thought through and planned and meticulously crafted, so I don't know what's wrong with that. But I think it's good when people give honest opinions on things. However, Stephen Dorff lied to people around the world and himself when he said he only picks good shit. I agree. And working with people like Uwe Boll, oh boy, Rob, let Detective Parrish take you to the evidence that lab that indicts Mr. Dorff. Exhibit A, Fear.com. Ooh. Exhibit B, the Uwe Boll masterpiece, Alone in the Dark. And Exhibit C, Leatherface. I like Stephen Dorff, but Rob, we have to call his bluff. I call his bluff, and I'm calling it. I don't understand where he's coming from, but hey, he's Stephen Dorff. But I think you're right. Alexander Wilson says, I recently rewatched Donnie Brasco, and it's a really good movie. Michael Franzese said it's one of the most accurate mob movies out there. He also said Pacino's performance was one of the best performances ever in a mob movie. Well, Alexander Wilson, like you, I love Donnie Darko, and you're a friend of ours. I love Donnie Darko, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised that that's true, because it's a great movie. I love it. Really do. I really think it's a great film. Black Intellect says, hey, Rob, here on behalf of the StoryMonster.com. It wants to know, would you see a horror version of Winnie the Pooh by Dario Argento or David Lynch? Ooh. Can it be earlier Dario Argento? I think right now there's only one choice. I would much rather see a David Lynch version of Winnie the Pooh. David Lynch's Winnie the Pooh. Come on, StoryMonster.com. Make this happen. Make it happen. Now, I want this in my belly. I would love to watch a David Lynch version of Winnie the Pooh. I mean, come on. Who wouldn't want to see that? That sounds good to me. But yeah, Dario Argento, man, he's not the greatest. Not the greatest lately. Oh, Alexander Wilson says, I meant that the person asked you a question about Axanar, which we fans know you're about to rant. Well, it's funny. Not a lot of people do ask me about Axanar. They don't ask me about Axanar very much, not anymore. I mean, it's been since 2017 when I resigned, and that's when Alec Peters went nuts. I don't know why, but I do know why, but look, I'm just so sorry for the donors and all the people. It's like, just make the movies, man, but he can't. He doesn't know how. So maybe he will one day, but the problem is it's never going to live up to the people he had, the professionals and the people that loved and cared about this material and knew what they were doing, more importantly, and knew if the people didn't know what they were doing, we all knew how to get those people to get the work we needed to make it look slick and professional. I think Prelude to Axanar is one of the great fan films ever made. And I edited the film, I post-supervised it, and I had a lot of input because, I took apart the script and reassembled it the way I reassembled it. So, yeah. 200 Watt Studios says, holy cow, I had to review Fear.com for a publication. The worst. The audience laughed at the opening scene. Yeah, it's never a good thing. But I don't like that to happen to anyone. Making movies, again, is so hard. I want every movie to be good. I don't like seeing bad movies. Brandon Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, for those more interested in the Stephen Dorff debacle, I would recommend the movie Somewhere. Oh, yes, that's what it was. It wasn't Nowhere. It was Somewhere. Somewhere, directed by Sofia Coppola. Here he plays a thinly veiled version of himself, a washed-up, burnt-out actor whose Gen X pretty boy days were over. Well, yeah, but I like that movie. I thought he was pretty raw and brought some real reality to that role. I dug him in it, so I would watch that. I did watch it. I actually saw that movie in a theater. I'm a fan of Sofia Coppola, and I like that movie. By the way, you said 1 out of 2, and I don't think you sent in a second part. Maybe you are still composing it. I don't know, but let's see. Maybe I'll read a letter. And I'll see if I can do that. And we'll see. We shall see. Well, you know what? Actually, no, because I have work that I have to do. But anyway, so Brandon. Actually, it's Brendan, not Brandon. I keep thinking Brendan Walsh. You're Brendan. It's different. Different name. At any rate, I'm ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode 716. It's been fun. It's been a good time. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank my moderators, beginning with Joshua Levesque, and of course, Justin Toner, Joshua Levesque. I saw Louise X Sparrow was here. Louise, I saw you here, and there you are. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being the good moderators that you are. I will be streaming with Justin from Justin's Collection at 7 o'clock Pacific time. If you don't follow Justin, it's the greatest Hot Toys channel on the web. It is at Justin's Collection on YouTube. But if it's your first time here, hey, subscribe to this channel. Become a member if you want. We are going to have an upcoming, as you know, we have our bi-weekly members Zoom chats for all of you who are members of the channel. We will have that on Saturday, and it'll be a long one. I'm not necessarily constrained by time. Sometimes they go 5 hours. I love seeing all of your faces from around the world. Those are fun. Those are fun to do for members. So, yeah, thank you for that. And there you go. As we say. And I will be doing a Midnighter tonight. Last night's Midnighter was quite fun. I mean, it was somber and sad, but it was a good Midnighter. Really had a good time. So I hope to see you tonight if you are so inclined. So Justin's at 7 o'clock. Justin's Collection on YouTube. Talking about the latest figure news, of which there is a lot this week. And that's it. So remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And not Ryan Johnson. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. I can't sign off quite yet. Brendan Sheehy's second part says, let me read these all back again. Rob, for those more interested in the Stephen Dorff debacle, I would recommend the movie Somewhere, directed by Sofia Coppola. Here he plays a thinly veiled version of himself, a washed-up, burnt-out actor whose Gen X pretty boy days were over. Yeah, the movie is a little pretentious, with a lot of bratty navel-gazing. Yet I actually liked Dorff's performance. I did too. And I thought he was a convincing father figure. Convincing father. He had lived this character. He isn't afraid to show the ugly side of such a character. The whole discussion today got me thinking about it. Yeah, that's why I didn't understand it. I didn't quite understand, like, where was he coming from after all this? So, sort of strange. But, hey, you can always point to somewhere. Nowhere, I'm sorry. Nowhere's Greg Araki's movie. Nowhere was part 3 of Greg Araki's masterstroke, the Teen Apocalypse trilogy, after Totally Fucked Up and the Doom Generation. By the way, Totally Fucked Up is a movie. I particularly enjoy his brand of nihilism. Oh, I do love me some Greg Araki. But, yeah, the Doom Generation and Nowhere and Totally Fucked Up. What a trilogy of films. Maybe it's kind of like his modern Ennui trilogy. Not Ryan Johnson sent in a very nice super chat. Thank you, Not Ryan Johnson. I don't know if you wanted to send me something, just send me something, or if you had a question to ask. But if you didn't ask your question, just send it to me. DM it to me on Facebook, and I'll read it, or on Twitter. I leave my DMs open. And you can always find me on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett, or on Twitter at BurnettRM. Stalk me wherever you want. And on that note, didn't I already say every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen? It's worth saying again, right? And on that note, I will say to all of you, have a better day.